A glance in the mirror. Chapter 40. Problem resolved. For a number of years Terry had been taking Ruth to her riding lessons. On one of these trips, through Pinner Green, he happened to see an estate agent's board outside a small, semi-detached cottage in Pinner Green. A row of mid-Victorian, two-up, two-down, semi-detached cottages with slated roofs, red sandstone brick walls, rebated white windows, painted windows, and cast-iron gutters. It later turned out to be an opportune glance, for Leighton Cottages stood opposite the Starling public house. This well-frequented watering hole was popular with Saturday nighters and weekend cyclists. They populated the tables and chairs placed behind the low wall, giving boundary to the pub's frontage. One of the cottages was for sale, and fortunately they had been kept true to their architectural period, displaying neither plastic-covered picture windows or painted brickwork. Number 5 was vacant, having been placed on the market by the local estate agent acting for the property's owner. It had been empty for a number of weeks, and the agent was eager to sell. A white-painted wicket gate accessed this neat little house, beyond which a brick path led up to an enclosed front porch. Inside, a wood-panelled front door lay open to reveal an empty room. The agent's details described a small, comfortable parlour, open fire and cast-iron grate, set in a tiled surround, above which a wooden mantel-shelf rested on a wide natural pine frame. The moulded picture rails and ornate skirtings complemented the detailed architraves. Either side of the chimney breast a shelf, with the lower half draped by two small curtains, hiding a narrow bookshelf beneath. All these details were the original fixtures and fittings, and quite charming. Opposite, another white-painted panelled door opens into a dining room, also provided with its own original black cast-iron polished grate, shone by frequent polishing. A tightly curved staircase takes you up to the 2 bedrooms, entranced by a step-up from the small landing. Downstairs, a further door off the dining room leads to a narrow lean-to kitchen, with its working surface, butler sink and draining board, lit by windows that look out onto a side passage. At its furthest end, a door reveals a white-painted bathroom. An old ledge and braced door led out into the garden with brick path, coal shed and garden store, behind a row of strung raspberry canes. An old cast-iron wooden rollered mangle gave an eye-catching focus point to the end of the garden. In years past, the enclosed area had been planted to form a kitchen garden on both sides of the brick path. It was perfect, and represented to him a longed-for haven. Terry's task now was to set the wheels in motion to buy it. He contacted the agent and found out that it was placed on the market for £56,000. He immediately offered the asking price, which was naturally accepted. Now he had to secure a mortgage and arrange a deposit of £500. Terry had a talk with Rita, who agreed that living there would make it simple for the children to keep in touch, being in walking distance of Norwood Drive, and, if necessary, enable some of them to live there too. A number 183 bus stopped outside the Starling public house opposite. The route ran from Harrow via North Harrow and Pinner to Northwood, and this was a further advantage, for it would enable the children to make an easy visit. Now he felt he was really making a constructive move in preserving the family unit. Sally's mother advised him not to let it be known what he was intending to do, because it would lead to an almost impossible situation at home. Therefore, he just had to be patient and let the purchase continue under its own steam. Terry got out his paints and painted a picture of the cottage, and imagined his future in his own very own home and peace of mind that it would afford. Terry approached the National Westminster Bank for a mortgage, who promised that they would lend the money once they had seen his separation papers. Rita offered to lend him the £500 deposit. His quest was almost over. All he had to do now was to buy the house and move in. How naive he was. A few weeks later, just before he was about to sign the completion contract, the bank called in the loan and refused to sanction any payment. The bank believed that he didn't have sufficient capital or salary to warrant such a loan. His security was suspect. He immediately contacted a friend, Keith, who ran an insurance business. He was also going through his own rather messy divorce settlement too, and he arranged a mortgage through one of his lenders, Guardian Assurance. Terry didn't fully understand what he was letting himself into. Panicked by the bank and their attitude, the new mortgage rate was nearly 18%, and with that kind of repayment and the maintenance bill he was volunteering to pay Sally, things were going to be very tight indeed. Thankfully, his freelance work would come to the rescue. Terry had to extract himself from Norwood Drive without any theatricals and upsets. Rita suggested that it should be done without fuss, so as not to upset the children. The next afternoon, Terry loaded up the car and left his past behind him. It was very sad to be going, especially not being able to explain to the children why he was going or to say goodbye. That evening, before he left, he had a long talk with Sally to find out if she was still resolved to carry on seeing her friend. Terry explained what he thought would happen if the divorce was made absolute, which he believed would come about in 8 months' time. The next day, the 14th of July, 1981, when Sally and the children were out of the house, Terry set to work, removing himself. Thankfully, he was on holiday, so he had a clear field. He started loading up the car, piling the excess, including the mattress, on top of the roof. It was just as well Leighton Cottage was only 3 miles down the road. With a racing heart, he set in motion an event which was to affect not just the present, but future generations. He felt a heady mixture of excitement, sadness, and great concern. His past home could no longer be put into good order, so he set off, making his way to his new home. Terry felt very exposed, slightly nervous, and highly embarrassed in case he met someone he knew, as the mattress bounced up and down on top of the car, casting a shadow on the windscreen. The overloaded car led him away. This was very much like Mr. Polly. Terry drew up outside number 5, and he started to unload. Fighting his way into the house, he hauled the heavy double mattress through the living room, up the winding narrow staircase, into the bedroom. Blast! He was stuck halfway up the stairs, unable to go in either direction. It was so heavy and unyielding. At last he crawled out from beneath the mattress and dragged it up the remaining stairs, one at a time, casting it with relief onto the floor. It was convenient that the divan section folded in half, which allowed him to cut them apart. He never did sew them together again. Attacking the bottom of the stairs in the same manner, he hauled each piece of furniture up each step, one at a time, and by the time he had emptied the car and put everything away, he was completely done in, shaking like a leaf, not just from the energy used, but recognizing the memorable moment. Terry was now on his own, for the first time in his life. He looked about himself. What had he done? Assembling all his little pieces together at one glance, he concluded that here was the basis of his new life. These possessions were the sum of nearly 25 years of struggle. travelling up to London in all weathers, scrimping and saving to provide for his family. Now, left with these few sticks, he worked non-stop all that summer holiday, particularly on the outside, to make the structure weatherproof for the coming winter. He was up on the roof, replacing slates, repairing gutters and downpipes, repointing brickwork, and finally painting the house. The unbearable daily reminder of what had happened forced him to distance himself away from their heart-bruising reminders. The construction of the new studio out of the old garden shed allowed him to continue with his freelance work. This was a godsend, for it made the whole enterprise possible. The daily reminders of things to be done to bring about change and the sheer joy of positive action drove him forward. They were days of sweet dreams that nothing could destroy. Inside he redecorated, replaced the curtains, hanging pictures and rewiring some electrical points in the kitchen. These fine sunny days went all too quickly. For the first time for many years, Terry was very engrossed in achieving all his goals, to make sure that this was the snuggest, securest home ever. The garden had to be tidied, the raspberries picked, and a vase of cut flowers arranged. The coal house, next to the studio, produced enough coal for all that first summer and following winter. On cold evenings, Terry lit the fire, played his tapes, and listened to the radio, enjoying his cup of coffee with a cigarette, sitting on his two-seater settee in front of the fire. He felt like Mole in Wind in the Willows. Rita was his first guest. She brought a friend round by car, and together they looked at every room, every new possession, and every item of furniture, all lovingly polished and carefully arranged. Terry's little house was dusted, tidied and swept, to show it off to its best advantage. Raspberries out of the garden with cream, and sponge cake on the cake stand, made especially for the occasion. They were highly impressed. The smell of coffee percolated the rooms, and the fire crackled in the hearth. Rebecca came round with loads of homework, which she did, sitting at the dining-room table, speaking to her friends on the telephone to find out what they were doing and constructing her homework as she went along. She was his most frequent visitor. Her voice gave the house a familiar ring, giving him company, making the transition that much easier. Occasionally she stayed overnight, and at the weekends. It was a treat for him to have her there for breakfast and to fuss around her. She became his rock, on which he was going to build a new life. Terry's freelance work was going well. The tool shed was now converted into a studio, and all the chemicals and dishes were in place. Lines for drying films were strung across the ceiling, and a blower heater speedily got them dry. Terry had a shock in store, for Rita asked for her money back, the £500 she had loaned him for the deposit for Leighton Cottage. At that time he was paying a voluntary divorce settlement of over £174 a month, which was enormous. That he was continually falling in arrears with. Frankly, something had to give way, although the freelance work he was doing made all the difference. Just enabled him to make some sort of payment, to not only Sally, but now her mother too. That September 1981, just before he started back to college after the summer break, the social welfare officer phoned to ask if she could come round to see how he was getting on. Terry was pleased to make a date, which she kept the following week. The little house was shipshape and Bristol fashion, fire-lit and coffee on. They settled down after he had shown her round, proudly pointing out all that he had achieved that summer. They discussed the whole situation, how things were shaping out, who had visited, all that had happened, and who had visited him since he had left 3 months before. She said that She was pleased that it had all worked out fine, and that she could see he was coping well. However, she and the Harrow Social Services would like him to return to 68 and take up where he had left off. Terry asked her what was different now. "Why are you asking this now?" She went on to say events had proved him right, that they had been wrong. They had been deceived into believing Mrs. Carey when she had said, "I only leave the home to get away from my husband." She went on to say Mrs. Carey was leaving the young children alone in the evenings and at night, that the older children were left in charge and they were not responsible, and that they, the social services, were concerned at the breakdown of discipline and care in the home. At last, he thought, the social services had come to their senses. He had told them all this all the time ago, and they should have looked into the situation more closely. She, the welfare officer, had not believed what he had been saying, and had caused the problem in the first place. It was perfectly true that he should have seen the family welfare officer after the third child had been born, to intercede, help persuade Sally that increasing the family would limit what could be done for all. He was now about to be offered a way to get back in charge. Now he could make sure the younger children were doing their homework, not to be out of the house in the evenings, where temptations could lead them astray. Terry told the welfare officer that he would be perfectly happy to sell up and go back to 68 Norwood Drive, but if he did, would they, in turn, give him their support? She asked, "What sort of support do you need?" Terry replied that he didn't want Mrs. Carey in the house, for that would only lead to disruption. The welfare officer replied, "I've got no authority to ask Mrs. Carey to leave. You will have to go back under the previous arrangement, or not at all." His reply to that was, "What a ridiculous request! You made the mistake. It's up to you to put it right." This was a most disappointing and discouraging answer. Terry told her that what she was saying was unreasonable, for he had been right, had not told a lie. An unreasonable wife supported by a prejudiced court had forced him out of his own home, had to buy another house, put in furniture, fixtures and fittings, leaving all that he had built up. What she was asking was to go back, but not to have any authority, and put up with a wife who was seeing another man. Terry continued, "Look around you, see the way I live, the circumstances and the condition. This is my way, and how I want my children to grow up. What my children and I want is goodwill and help, not to be led back into chaos. What they were asking for was unworkable. He would have to say no to her request." With that, she left, never to be in touch again, understanding that there was no other course of action left for any of us. Sally had had her way again. What a terrible outcome! If only Rita had had the strength to tell the truth. Why didn't the social welfare officer look more closely in what was happening? It was all so predictable. As soon as he was told that the court do not accept the father's basic rights to have custody where the mother is irresponsible, he knew that he was in an impossible position. What a crazy, stupid ruling, and how annoying the law was. How differently things would have turned out if the authorities had been more caring, had looked into his case more thoroughly. The facts were all clearly there to see.